Good evening and welcome to World Today, a brand new show on DD India, which we from here on will be your daily window to the world. I'm Amritpal Singh. On the show tonight, the latest on the cyber attack on Iran's nuclear facility. Is there Israeli link to that? We'll talk about that. And a strict warning issued to China by the United States. That and much more over the next 1 hour. But first up, the top headlines. Expert panel of the Central Drug Regulator DCGA recommends emergency use authorization to Russian vaccine Sputnik 5. Second day of Tika Utsav today. Day 1 sees workplace vaccination centers in operation. Cumulative vaccination reaches 10 crore 45 lakh. The Natanz nuclear facility of Iran hit by a blackout the day after it unveiled new uranium enrichment equipment. Iran describes the blackout as an act of nuclear terrorism by Israel. Netanyahu says the fight against Iran's nuclearization is a massive task. England to ease lockdown restrictions from today. Non-essential retail shops, gyms, swimming pools and salons set to reopen. 32 million people in the UK have received at least one dose of coronavirus vaccine. And BAFTA announces its prestigious awards. Chloe Zhao directed Nomadland scoops Best Picture. Director, actress and cinematography. Frances McDormand wins the Best Actress BAFTA for Nomadland. Anthony Hopkins wins the Best Actor award for The Father. Tributes paid to late Bollywood actors Irfan Khan and Rishi Kapoor. So those were the headlines we were tracking at this hour. Let's begin with our big news. Well, amid the worrying scenario of surging COVID cases, there is good news on the vaccination front. The subject expert committee has given emergency authorization for usage of Russia's Sputnik 5 vaccine. This vaccine is also administered in 2 doses. This vaccine will also be produced within the country. Hyderabad-based Dr. Reddy's Laboratories has a tie-up to bring the Russian vaccine to India. The Russian Direct Investment Fund, or the RDIF, has partnered with Dr. Reddy's labs in September last year for clinical trials in India. The Sputnik 5 vaccine is said to have an efficacy of 92%. It will be the third COVID vaccine to be available in India after Oxford AstraZeneca's Covishield and Bharat Biotech's Covaxin. Well, the Natanz nuclear facility of Iran hit by a blackout the day after it unveiled new uranium enrichment equipment. Iran described the blackout as an act of nuclear terrorism by Israel. Netanyahu says the fight against Iran's nuclearization is a massive task.
An incident at Iran's Natanz nuclear facility was caused by an act of nuclear terrorism, the country's nuclear chief Ali Akbar Salehi said, according to state TV, adding that Tehran reserves the right to take action against the perpetrators. Earlier on Sunday, the spokesman for Iran's Atomic Energy Organization had said that the problem with the electrical distribution grid of the Natanz site had caused the incident, Iranian media reported. The spokesman, Behrouz Kamalvandi, said the incident caused no casualties or contamination. The facility, located in the desert in the central province of Isfahan, is the centerpiece of Iran's uranium enrichment program and is monitored by inspectors of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the UN nuclear watchdog. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, at a ceremony with Israeli military and intelligence chiefs marking the 73rd anniversary next week of Israel's founding, made no direct reference to Natanz, but he said the fight against Iran's nuclearization is a massive task. In his public remarks, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin did not comment on Iran specifically. He said the Biden administration would continue to ensure Israel's qualitative military edge in the Middle East as part of a strong commitment to Israel and the Israeli people.
As a major strategic partner for the United States, our bilateral relationship with Israel in particular is central to regional stability and security in the Middle East. During our meeting, I reaffirmed to Minister Gantz our commitment to Israel is enduring and it is ironclad.
The incident at the Natanz facility comes amid efforts by Tehran and Washington to revive Iran's 2015 nuclear deal with major powers. The two nations laid out tough stance at indirect talks in Vienna last week on how to bring both back into full compliance with the deal. World Today Desk, DD India.
And to talk more about that, I'm joined by Ambassador Anil Kumar Trigunath, a former senior diplomat. Ambassador Trigunath, many thanks for joining me on the show. Sir, what do you make of this development? A blackout happens at an Iranian nuclear facility a day after they unveil their new enrichment plan. They accuse Israel of nuclear terrorism. Israel says, well, to stop Iran from nuclearization is a massive task. The U.S. Defense Secretary is there. He says Israel is a very important ally and very important for the U.S. from the point of view of regional stability. Is there a link in all this?
Yes, of course, Amrit. I mean, the thing is that this Israeli and Iranian rivalry or animosity has been continuing since 1969. And the efforts by the Israelis have been, and this is essentially a relationship in which they don't want to acknowledge or rather decimate the existence of the other. So this is one of the most venomous relationships that exists today in the region and has the potential to destabilize the whole. And that was one of the major reasons that during the Obama administration, in order to contain the Iranian quest for nuclear armaments or even for civil nuclear cooperation, which was there. So they had decided to agree on this something called JC, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, with which Iran was supposed to contain and provide access to the IAEA inspectors to inspect all the facilities. That was continuing at that time. If you remember, the Gulf monarchies like Saudi Arabia and UAE, as well as Israel, have been very much against it, and they wanted to derail the whole thing. And during that period also, and since then, you must have, if you see last year alone, there have been attempts to destabilize, there have been problems, fires, mysterious fires in various Iranian plants. There have been attacks on Iranian freighter ships near the Red Sea very recently. There have been cyber attacks that the most prominent nuclear scientist from Iran, Fakhrizadeh, was assassinated. So this all has been going on. But until recently, what was happening, it was understood that it was the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad that has been involved. Very often, they would not openly come out to Israelis and say it. And if you read the books of some of the books on this, you will find that every single incident has been very well planned and has been executed. And of course, more often than not, the American intelligence agencies and Pentagon are aware of this because it directly impacts on joint security and makes problems for the Americans who are trying to now come back to this deal from which President Trump had moved out in 2018. And this has allowed the Iranians to continue to enrich. And by using these new centrifuges at the Natanz facility, which is one of the most sophisticated underground facilities in Iran, what they did was they tried to use new centrifuges, which would have provided them the possibility of enriching the uranium in a very short time and a multiple fold. And therefore, the Israelis have been thinking that they cannot allow their security to be compromised because they think that their only problem remains with Iran in the region, as they have already started working out good relationships with these Arab monarchies, as you know about the Abraham Accords and others. So what they do is they try to attack or immobilize some of these plants and their systems so that, mainly through cyber attacks, and assassinations have been rather common, by just to delay the procurement or possibility of Iran procuring, because Israel thinks that eventually Iran is going to go nuclear irrespective of the nuclear deal. But this has caused a major problem. And in my view, the visit of General Austin on Sunday, because it happened on Saturday, was timely because of this particular reason. I mean, he happens to be the Biden administration is not that very happy with Netanyahu's style of work. They do not want to be put on the spot. So General Austin was there to talk to them, to assure them that USA stands with the Israeli security, but at the same time to warn Israel, in my view, that they should not go ahead and do something that will derail any talks that are likely to happen. And in the process, it might create a fracas in the region, and there could be a major war that might await by accident or by design.
Oh, Ambassador Triganath, you're saying that General Austin, among other things, is there to rein in the Israelis, because the Israeli rhetoric in the wake of the Vienna talks has been rather strident. They're saying that, well, the Iranians need to be stopped. They've given statements to that effect. Even Netanyahu's this statement saying that it's going to be a massive task, virtually undermining any sort of concessions that the P5+1 may be ready to give Iran, and in return for reining in their enrichment program. So the Israelis' rhetoric has been rather strident. So you're saying that General Austin would be talking to the Israelis that give the deal a chance?
Yes, of course. I mean, they had arrived at a deal during Obama's time, when President Biden was the vice president and was very much involved in this whole thing. And so General Austin is well aware of the priorities of the US government. So this was the effort. And as you know, the Biden had said that if his administration came to power, they will return to the deal. And that's what they precisely started talking. Of course, there are difficulties on the Iranian side, because Iran has also crossed the threshold. I mean, they have to also revert back. These are difficult negotiations. The European, the Russian, the Chinese, everybody is working on it together and trying to bring Iran to the table. And that is why the Europeans have really criticized and condemned this attack on the Iranian facility that could derail the talk. And that's why not only once, it has earlier also been, you must recognize that the Mossad and the US intelligence agencies work very, very closely. But whatever, if you were to read that, sometimes they don't tell them everything. But in this particular case, a report was published in Jerusalem Post as well as in the New York Times that they had the advance information about this. This was to be made public, and that was essentially.
So you're saying the American agencies had advanced information about this attack?
And it was to be made public as well to the New York Times.
Oh, it was to be made public. All right. So do you think then the Israelis would be reined in, giving the kind of rhetoric even today, Netanyahu's statement, their action even while the talks were on? I'm sure the Americans would have, spoken to the Israelis, saying that, look, this is what we are attempting at Vienna, so do nothing to derail it, yet they go ahead, and if they did so, yet they go ahead and conduct this. Do you think the Israelis would really listen to the Americans?
Well, one thing we have to see that Israel in a very significant and critical manner depends a great deal on the US manufacturing in a way. I mean, the support of the United States is very crucial for the Israelis. Of course, they have their own Jewish lobby and everything there, but at the same time, this kind of an activity that puts the American administration, especially that, as Biden does not seem to like Netanyahu very much, I think, in my view, this was a red line that has been crossed. But they have made their point that they will not allow Iran to go nuclear, number one, or to acquire the kind of competence and power that could challenge the Israeli authority. So there is always a tension that's going to build up unless the overall scenario within the Gulf between Israel and Iran gets sorted out somehow.
Okay. All right. Let's, understand. So where does this, would this have any, would it cast its shadow on the Vienna process?
No, I don't think so. Now, of course, the Iranians will like to have a little more of their cake, but the Iranians are also no saints. They also use this cyber warfare and the clandestine warfare as well as their proxies to attack different facilities, Israeli and others. They have been doing the same. So that continues. Therefore, that's why the reaction from the Iranian side is that we will take revenge of this. Like when Soleimani was killed by the Americans, they said we'll take the revenge. But they have the strategic questions because they understood that going back to the deal may be beneficial, much more beneficial to them, or at least provide them a longer time frame, and which is what the Israelis fear. But in my view, that the most of the people who are involved in this, especially the Europeans and the Americans, do not want Israel to be a spoiler in this. At the same time, they are trying to ensure and assure Israelis that their security will not be compromised and their military and technological edge will be maintained.
Okay. Ambassador Trignath, I want to understand from you what transpired at the first indirect talks between the US and Iran, the first round of talks where the Americans went ahead and said that they were willing to lift sanctions, not restricted just to the JCPOA. What did they mean by that?
Well, you know that thing is that if you know that the Iranians had said that it was the Americans who had gone out of the deal, so they are the ones who have to return. They are the ones who had imposed the sanctions, so the sanctions should be revoked by them. So the action actually, as far as the Iranians were concerned, lay with the Americans. Number one. Number two, that the Iranians, who have continued in the meantime to create more enrichment and greater enriched quantities, they have now collected about 120 kilos or something like that of the enriched uranium, which can manufacture some arms, nuclear arms for that. So I think that what they have been asking is, that's why they said that it's not going to be tit for tat or a step-by-step arrangement. And they said we are not going to have direct talks till the Americans have actually joined the deal, because they are not part of the program at the moment. I mean, the P5 now, right now, this is only E3 plus 2 plus Iran. That was basically the thing. So now that the Americans are there and they were all happy about the thing, they step by step. So what in my view happened is that it is not only now after the Vienna talks, but if you come to think of it, the Americans have been making several confidence building measures towards the Iranians. For example, they held back the sale of F-35s to UAE. They held back 3,000 missiles sale to Saudi Arabia. They allowed Iran to sell gas to Iraq. All these are some of the confidence building measures. In addition, they have appointed their own special envoy for this purpose, and they've been wanting to, in direct talks, they wanted to got ready for doing that. But they want the Iranians to come clean on it, because see, there is a great trust deficit.
But despite what you say, Ambassador, when they went into the talks, when both sides, because I was closely following this, when both sides went into these talks, the rhetoric was very high. The Americans were saying, look, don't expect too much from this. We want to give it a chance, but this is going to be very difficult. It has to be a step-by-step approach. The Iranians need to reciprocate. The Iranians on their part was saying that, take it all or nothing. First remove the sanctions, otherwise there is no forward movement. Then the talks happen on the insistence of the EU. The European powers are pushing. Then we see, that statement by Ned Price, where he doesn't get into the specifics. He says, I'm not here to give you a chapter and verse on this, but yes, we are willing to lift sanctions, not limited just to the JCPOA. So is it an empty gesture where they want to give a long rope to Iran, or is it some sort of a deal, understanding has been created that, okay, they will make a public statement, you soften your stand, make Rouhani say something, and then the two working groups formed would have worked out that they will do this, you will do that. Would all that, what is your experience as a diplomat? How do these things work?
No, you are absolutely right. It's precisely this way that the negotiations, are they move inch by inch, and as you know that it took almost 5 years, 4 years, for them to even arrive at the JCPOA in the beginning, and they were very difficult discussions and talks, because that really the Iranians thought that they were giving too much, especially the Khomeini and his ilk, which were conservatives. They thought that we are giving too much on this. But at the same time, even now, if you were to see President Rouhani's statement, Jawad Zarif's statement, or for that matter from the American side, they are very cautious and they are very optimistic from all of them. And they seem to have arrived at certain step-by-step things. So I believe that what will happen is immediately some humanitarian assistance, because Iran today is suffering the most in the region from the COVID-19. And therefore, there have been, I read somewhere the AstraZeneca vaccines are coming there. And, so I believe that this will be provided, but it will not be everything lifted up quickly. Secondly, in Iran, there are going to be the elections. And in all likelihood, the conservatives might come back in May. So the Americans are also must be thinking during the negotiations that if we agree to everything with this government now, tomorrow everybody changes, so what is the guarantee that this will hold on? That is another thing in their mind. So I think it has to be in some ways step by step, but steps have to be critical. And so that the both sides can go, especially the Iranians, the moderate Iranians who are into the deal, can go back to their country and show them that yes, there is going to be these benefits that are accruing to us, and this is sort of a win-win for us. So that's the important aspect.
All right. Ambassador Trignath, let's go back to what the Iranians said about this attack. They said it's an act of nuclear terrorism. They've sworn revenge. Now that there are impending elections, would the conservatives be under pressure to be seen as taking some sort of a revenge? And what could that mean? What do their capabilities allow them to do?
You see that both of them have certain capabilities, it's no doubt, between both Israelis. Israelis are far more savvy and they have much better intelligence service than anybody in the region for that. Mossad is one of the finest intelligence services, so they can carry out these kind of operations. Plus, they also have their assets inside Iran. And there is already in Iran a lot of domestic problems happening, unrest and all. So they all capitalize on these kind of things. As far as Iran is concerned, you know that Iran has at least three major I would say non-state actors which are very powerful in the process. Number one, Hezbollah, that is in Lebanon and Syria, where they are holding on to against the Israelis and keep their target is only Israel. Then you have in Gaza, Hamas is there, then Houthis in Saudi Arabia, in Yemen. So they have their own, it's apart from their revolutionary guards and their militias, various kinds of militias all over. So they can have their own, I would say, the revenge mechanisms. And when will they take is something that is to be seen. But at the moment, I think that Natanz facility, the Iranians are saying that it was the first crop of the centrifuges that were used. But now they have the latest one, so they'll replace it, so modernize the facility further. Now that is, I think, just for public consumption, but some kind of a thing might happen, but I don't think that at the moment they would like to derail the talks.
Because it is in their interest for the talks, the
right time, yes, they will wait for it.
They will wait for it. Ambassador, how would the Sunni Arab world be seeing this?
Well, the Sunni Arab world obviously is unhappy, especially Saudi Arabia, which again has the same kind of relationship, conflictual relationship with Iran ever since the mullahs have come to the power there. And this is also Shia-Sunni divide that is very much there. But what has happened is during Trump's time, there has been tremendous focus on the Middle East, and especially against Iran, which Trump tried to put maximum pressure on them, but did not succeed very much. Of course, the sanctions hurt them. Combined with the pandemic, but at the same time, the Arabs also have their own major problems. You see today, because of the economic conditions, their own economic condition is not that good. Oil is not selling that well, and the internal disputes, internal problems are also going there. So each one has his own. Like for example, the Yemen war, Saudi Arabia and Iran are virtually directly involved in one way or the other, because they say Iranians are fully supporting the Houthis in Yemen. So Yemen is intractable war, basically. It's unwinnable war by the Saudis, and it was totally ineffective and, in my view, an unnecessary war when it happened. And it happened, if you come to think of it, when the JCPOA was signed last time in 2015. It's immediately after that the Saudi Arabians and the Sunni allied groups they all went ahead and attacked in Yemen, and that's what they did. So they are having their own problems, whether they are engineered by Arab Spring or otherwise. So they are not happy about this. But I think the Biden administration, what they have done is they have tried to put them all on their back foot. That's what, like as I told you, that they canceled the deal or suspended the big arms deals which have given
with UAE,
UAE for that matter, or a parity with the Israelis F-35s. So that's what the Americans are doing in that sense. So they are trying to get this deal through somehow or the other, so that the Biden administration could also claim a victory.
All right. The critics of the Vienna process say there is no going back, there is no salvaging the 2015 deal. Once President Trump walked away from it, the Iranians have, much water has flown under the bridges. So there is no going back to 2015 position. They've already done so much of enrichment. So in effect, you might call it a return to the JCPOA, but it will be a JCPOA 21, really, which would be very different from a JCPOA 15.
Yes, very true. I mean, the last 3 years, because of the withdrawal of the Americans from the deal, the Iranians have realized that they cannot trust the West in that sense, and the Europeans have not been able to help them that much, although they tried to keep the deal alive somehow. But Iran has incrementally enriched, because then it realized that the nuclear option is the only option that it has, because Israel already has nuclear weapons. And therefore, it's the only thing that can keep it on. It has tremendous missile systems. It has the non-state actors and militias that are working everywhere. So that no other country in the region has that kind of capacity, frankly. And therefore, and Russia and China are basically helping the Iranians. So what we are looking at is a very different kind of a power dynamic emerging within the Middle East. And so it could not be exactly the same deal, but Iran would want it to be the same deal, and the inspectors have said that it is possible to go back and they can retract, and they are promising, the Iranians are promising that they will
going back to the same enrichment levels that they had in 2015, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. How difficult, Ambassador Triganath, would it be for the Biden administration to stick to this, given the fact that within the divided U.S. polity, given the composition of the Congress, the Senate especially, how difficult or easy would it be for President Biden to be seen as giving much concessions and then staying the course?
Well, I don't think that they will be giving the concession. If you are reverting to the same deal, means what you are doing basically is lifting the main sanctions.
Right.
And if you know that in the last time, about a month ago, I think that the UNSC, when it came for sanctioning the Iranians again as far as the arms embargo was concerned, this was the Americans did not oppose it. So they are trying to do that. Of course, the Biden administration is not easy to, in their domestic politics, to carry forward anything that is strong, and especially when the Jewish lobby is so strong in the United States that it virtually calls the shots as far as Israel is concerned. So that they are working on it. But then among them also, what my reading is that they have understood that perhaps in the recent past, Israeli actions have not been that very useful to maintaining the peace in the region. And let me tell you, even the Arab countries, none of them wants a war. They want Iran to be contained, but they don't want a war to happen. And therefore, because see, they will be decimated in the process. Israel, of course, everybody, because the kind of missiles or less 100% they are able to take off in one attack, it's possible, but otherwise it will be a prolonged and a very painful war, which is what everybody wants to avoid. And I don't think that it will be difficult, so difficult for the Biden administration to carry forward as a mark of peace.
All right. We'll leave it there. Ambassador Neel Kumar Triganath, thank you so much for joining us and lending us your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
And moving on, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that the United States is concerned about China's aggressive actions against Taiwan and warned it would be a serious mistake for anyone to try and change the status quo in the Western Pacific by force. Blinken added that the United States has a long-standing commitment under the Taiwan Relations act to ensure that Taiwan has the ability to defend itself and sustain peace and security in the Western Pacific. Tensions between Washington and Beijing soared. An American warship sailed close to Taiwan. On Friday, the White House said it was keeping a close watch on increased Chinese military activities in the Taiwan Strait and called Beijing's actions potentially destabilizing. And in a dramatic development, Jordan's King Abdullah and former Crown Prince and his half-brother Prince Hamza made their first joint appearance at 100 years of independence. A royal family laid wreaths at the memorial to the martyrs and the tombs of royalty in the Ragdan Palace in Amman. Hamza pledged allegiance to King Abdullah late on Monday following mediation by the royal family. He pledged allegiance 2 days after the military warned him over actions that it said were undermining Jordan's security and stability. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has said that the country was working for the peaceful resolution of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia over Donbas region. Turkish President held talks with his Russian and Ukrainian counterparts on the issue earlier this week. Erdogan reiterated his call for the resolution of escalating Donbas crisis. Meanwhile, the United States said that Russia has amassed more troops on Ukraine's eastern border than at any time since 2014. However, Moscow denied its troops as threat. Well, in Kyrgyzstan, voters supported a presidential constitution referendum expanding leader Sadryar Japarov's term for a second time. Preliminary Central Election Commission data based on 75% of the ballots found a majority of voters supported the reform, although total turnout was just above 30%. The constitutional reform will make the political system of the Central Asian nation similar to that of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Meanwhile, a poll commissioned by the United States-based International Republican Institute and published this month found Japarov was by far the most trusted politician in the country. And let's now take a look at what else has been happening in the world.
In eastern Caribbean island of St. Vincent, more people fled their homes as La Soufriere volcano rumbled loudly for the third day. The La Soufriere volcano erupted after decades of inactivity and pumped dark clouds of ash into the air. Rumbling noises continued to emanate from the volcano, with ash coating rooftops, cars and roads in Kingstown. More than 3,200 people were evacuated. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves said it was unclear how much more ash the volcano would vent out. St. Vincent has not experienced volcanic activity since 1979, when an eruption caused nearly $100 million in damages. Sudan marked 2 years on Sunday since the overthrow of former President Omar al-Bashir and erupted violence. Over the course of the new government's interim rule under Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok, Sudan took steps to normalize relations with Israel in a deal brokered with the help of the United States. Earlier this year, Sudan's central bank sharply devalued the currency, announcing a new regime to unify official and black market exchange rates in an effort to overcome a crippling economic crisis and access debt relief. The change was a key reform demanded by foreign donors and the International Monetary Fund, but was delayed for months as shortages of basic goods and rapid inflation complicated a fragile political transition. Rescue teams have beefed up draining off water to save the 21 miners trapped in a coal mine in northwest China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, with one high-power submerged pump having been deployed. The mine was flooded on Saturday, while 8 professional teams with more than 1,400 rescuers were dispatched to the scene for rescue. As of Monday morning, 7 water pumps have been installed at the rescue site, pumping more than 1,600 cubic meters of water per hour at full capacity. In Japan, people across Fukushima Prefecture staged a protest against the government's decision to dispose of radioactive wastewater from the crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean. The Japanese government has recently decided to discharge wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant into the sea. The resolution is scheduled to be formally confirmed on 13th April. Protesters rallied on streets near Onahama Port in Iwaki City holding slogans against dumping the wastewater into the ocean and showing their wishes. According to statistics from the non-governmental environmental organizations that held the rally, 41 of the 59 municipal assemblies in Fukushima prefecture disagree with the plan. Among them, 25 municipal councils expressed strong opposition and 16 municipal councils asked the central government to respond cautiously and submit relevant opinions. Peruvians queued up in long lines on Sunday to elect their new president. Presidential candidates Keiko Fujimori, the daughter of the jailed former president Alberto Fujimori, and Rafael Lopez Aliaga also cast their votes. The election for a new president and Congress comes against the backdrop of a new and fierce second wave of coronavirus pandemic. Two contenders from opposite poles of the political spectrum could face off in the second round in June. Hernando de Soto, a liberal economist, and leftist professor Pedro Castillo have both edged to the front of the pack following late gains in support. Around 25.2 million eligible voters in the country voted to elect their president. Wearing masks at polling booths was mandatory, while voters were also being asked to bring their own pens to mark ballots in a bid to prevent COVID-19. Election officials in the Central African country, Chad, began counting ballots immediately after the polls closed in Sunday's tense presidential polls. Chad voted on Sunday to choose a president in an election that is likely to see incumbent President Idriss Déby coming to power for the sixth time after ruling the country for almost 3 decades. The 68-year-old leader is one of Africa's longest-serving leaders and an ally of Western powers in the fight against Islamist militants in West and Central Africa. This time he is facing 6 rivals, including former Prime Minister Albert Bahimi Badake. Chad is facing severe economic and social crisis. The voting took place amid violent protests and anti-government demonstrations in its capital, N'Djamena. The Election Commission has until 25th April to announce provisional results. Counting of ballots also began in Benin, a day after the West African nation voted to choose a new president in an election that was widely boycotted by some opposition parties over pre-election violence. Some also objected to President Patrice Talon's quest for a second term, accusing him of taking a U-turn on a pledge he made as a candidate in 2016 to serve only 1 term. The polls also took place amid violent protests that have tormented the nation for days. Amid this, Talon, a multimillionaire cotton magnate, faces 2 relatively little-known opposition candidates. Many accuse Talon's government of detaining the prominent opposition leaders on terrorism-related charges, accusations that the government has constantly denied. Provisional results of the first round of the election are expected by April 13th. In Ecuador, banker Guillermo Lasso had pulled off a surprise win in Sunday's presidential runoff against socialist economist Andrés Arauz. Lasso secured 52.5% of the vote versus 47.5% for Arauz, according to the National Electoral Council. However, Lasso still faces a challenging task in restarting a sluggish economy struggling after last year's coronavirus outbreak, which has spiked in recent months as vaccination efforts stalled.
And Britain entered its 3rd day of national mourning on Sunday following the death of Queen Elizabeth's husband, Prince Philip. The funeral service for Philip, who died at the age of 99, will be held at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle, preceded by a national minute's silence. Here's more into what happened this morning weekend.
Marking the 3rd day of national mourning, Britons on Sunday descended to Windsor Palace to meet their favourite prince for the last time as they paid tribute to the longest-serving monarch who had been at Queen Elizabeth's side throughout her record-breaking 69-year reign. Although Buckingham Palace has set April 17 as the date for Philip's funeral at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle, it also said that long-established plans for the funeral had to be scaled down because of COVID-19 restrictions. However, no public processions will take place and ceremony will be within the grounds of Windsor Castle. For Britons, the death of a senior royal meant that they were witnessing history.
With the royal family and obviously the Queen well respected, and you kind of do it for her as well, as obviously the monarchy. So yeah, it's quite nice to just come and pay your respects and just to kind of know that the Queen's in there and we're all thinking of her. And he does a lot for like just normal people, and you feel sad when somebody you know has passed, and it's like somebody you know, it's like, oh my goodness, like you just didn't expect it. We all thought he was doing well, and then the news broke and it's like, oh.
However, a Land Rover that the Duke of Edinburgh helped design over 15 years ago will be at the centre of his ceremonial funeral procession next Saturday. The vehicle is believed to be modified Defender 130 guns bus, which was commissioned for use by the Queen's late husband in 2005. In a tweet, Jaguar Land Rover said, and I quote, "We are deeply saddened by the passing of His Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Our thoughts are with Her Majesty, the Queen and royal family." The Duke devoted his life to public service and made a significant contribution to UK manufacturing, engineering and design. Later on Sunday, a special service of remembrance was held for the Prince at Canterbury Cathedral. The service was led by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, who is also expected to officiate at Prince Philip's funeral. During the service, the Archbishop grieved the loss and said that no words can reach into the depth of sorrow that goes into bereavement.
As for every other, no words can reach into the depth of sorrow that goes into bereavement. We all know that it is not simply a factor of age or familiarity. It is not obliterated by the reality of a very long life remarkably led. Nor is the predictability of death's arrival a softening of the blow.
In his statement expressing gratitude and touching praise for his father, Prince Charles on Saturday paid tribute to his dear Papa, who had given such remarkably devoted service to Queen Elizabeth, to the royal family, to Britain and to the Commonwealth.
I particularly wanted to say that my father, I suppose the last 70 years, has given the most remarkable, devoted service to the Queen, to my family, and to the country, and also to the whole of the Commonwealth. And as you can imagine, my family and I miss my father enormously. He was a much loved and appreciated figure, and apart from anything else, I can imagine, and we're so deeply touched by the number of other people here and elsewhere around the world in the Commonwealth who also, I think, share our loss and our sorrow. And my dear Papa was a very special person who, I think, above all else, would have been amazed by the reaction and the touching things that have been said about him. And from that point of view, we are, my family, deeply grateful for all that. It will sustain us in this particular loss and at this particularly sad time.
However, people welcomed the news that grandson Prince Harry will be returning from the United States to attend his grandfather's funeral. Although reactions were more mixed on the news that his pregnant wife Meghan will remain in the US on doctor's orders. World Today Desk, DD India.
And time for us to slip into a very short break on World Today. We'll be back in a moment. Stay tuned.
Kitchen waste, green waste, dried leaves from the garden, which are a source of carbon.
The money we received from the government added to our savings all went into the rice mill. I was into athletics before going in for judo, which really attracted me. It is a wonderful sport for girls and very beneficial.
Namaste India.
Namaste Land.
Marhaban ila al-Hind.
Zari India.
Salam India.
Namaste India.
Namaskar Bharata.
Mui
Nous
India.
sommes Land.
Nahnu Hunud.
India.
Ma Hindi Hasti.
Mung Hindian.
Salam Hindustan.
We are India.
Your window to rising India. India's voice on global platforms. Latest news from India and around the world. In-depth analysis of global headlines. Watch DD India in your country. Available for downlink in Middle East countries. STTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 17 at 93.5 degrees east. HDTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT 10 at 83 degrees east. For technical details, scan here. Switch to DD India now.
Welcome back. You're watching World Today. And let's move on. England will begin phase 2 of easing lockdown restrictions. All shops are set to open along with gyms, spas. All shops are allowed to open, including hairdressers, beauty salons and other close contact services. Restaurants and pubs are allowed to serve food and drinks to customers sitting outdoors. Gyms and spas can reopen, as can zoos, theme parks, libraries and community centres. Members of the same household can take a holiday in England in self-contained accommodation. The British administration has set 17 May as a target date for complete easing of restrictions. The US road movie Nomadland triumphed at the BAFTA Film Awards on Sunday, with Chinese director Chloe Zhao's intimate portrayal of the marginalized Americans winning in 4 categories, including Best Film, Best Actress and Best Director. The socially distanced and largely remote award ceremony in London saw a strong showing of women directors in the run-up to this month's Oscars.
Entertainment should look like what the world looks like. These were the words of India's pride in Hollywood, Priyanka Jonas Chopra, as she arrived on a pared-back British Academy of Film and Television Awards red carpet ahead of the ceremony. Chopra also said she believes improvements still need to be made in the industry. The Golden Icon was one of the presenters at the BAFTAs on Sunday night. She presented the award for Best Animated Film, which went to Soul.
And the BAFTA is awarded to Soul.
The British Academy of Film and Television Arts ceremony, aka BAFTAs, was held virtually over 2 nights due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, with nominees joining in by video. US recession drama Nomadland, about a community of van dwellers, continued its winning streak in the run-up to the Oscars. 39-year-old Chloe Zhao is only the second woman to win in the directing category at the BAFTAs.
Chloe Zhao for Nomadland.
Thank you so much, BAFTA. Thank you so much. I think I just made my teacher at Brighton College really proud. A huge special shout out to Frances McDormand, who is a brilliant storyteller of her own. Thank you, Fran, for discovering Fern with me and for bringing so much joy to our journey. Thank you.
Adarsh Gaurav, who was nominated for the BAFTA in the Best Leading Actor category for his performance in Netflix's The White Tiger, lost the award to Anthony Hopkins. The veteran Welsh actor clinched the trophy for his performance in The Father. 83-year-old Anthony Hopkins described winning Best Actor as wonderful and unexpected. Hopkins portrayed a man with dementia and starred alongside Olivia Colman in The Father, which also took home the award for adapted screenplay. The actor cracked a joke, saying all that he had to do was to act old.
This is wonderful. I mean, I'm now at this time in my life when I never expected to get this, you know. I mean, I got to a point in my life and I thought, I wonder if I'll ever work again. That's the actor's nightmare.
Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, a jazz drama set in 1920s Chicago, won 2 awards at the opening of the BAFTAs. The film, starring Viola Davis and the late Chadwick Boseman, also won the costume design and makeup and hair. Meanwhile, Indian stars Irfan Khan and Rishi Kapoor, who died in April 2020, were among the individuals who were honoured at BAFTA's In Memoriam segment, which also paid tribute to Prince Philip, Chadwick Boseman and Christopher Plummer. The In Memoriam segment honours personalities lost in the past year. In the meantime, British musicians and a BAFTA nominee took to the Film Awards stage to perform musical numbers at the ceremony. Former One Direction member Liam Payne opened the show with a rendition of his track With a Lesso Midnight. Also, Brit Award nominee Celeste performed one of her 3 original songs from the trial of the Chicago 7. Now quickly recapping, let's go through all the winners who made their names in Sunday's event. Nomadland bagged award for Best Film. Sir Anthony Hopkins won the Best Actor award for The Father. Also, Chloe Zhao became the second woman to win in the directing category, with Frances McDormand winning the Best Leading Actress award for Nomadland. Promising Young Woman bagged the honour for Outstanding British Film, and My Octopus Teacher won the Best Documentary. Soul was announced as the Best Animated Film, while the present Farah Nabulsi bagged the award for British Short Film. Bureau Report, DD India.
Today is the 12th of April, and let's take a look at what transpired on this day in history.
On 12th April, it was on this day in the year 1945 that then US President Franklin Roosevelt passed away in his office. A statesman and politician, Roosevelt was the 32nd President of the United States and the only one to win 4 presidential terms. He served as president between 1933 to 1945. He could not complete his last term in office, and after his death, the then Vice President Harry Truman completed his term in office. It was on this day in 1947 that the renowned American novelist Tom Clancy was born in Baltimore. Clancy was well known for his suspenseful and thriller novels, which were generally based on military technology and espionage. He rose to fame with his very first novel, The Hunt for Red October, which also inspired a Hollywood movie by the same name. The famous character of Jack Ryan is also believed to have been taken from one of his works. In 1954, on April 12th, Bill Haley and the Comets recorded the song Rock Around the Clock, which broke several records in the history of pop music. The record sold an estimated 25 million copies worldwide and became the second biggest selling single at the time, just behind Bing Crosby's White Christmas. A day that marked an important event in the history of medicine. It was on April 12, 1955, that the polio vaccine developed by Dr. Jonas Salk was declared safe for use. The announcement was made following one of the largest clinical trials for vaccines. The development came as a relief to the world that crippled by the rising cases of polio. It was on this day in the year 1961 when Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first ever human being to travel into space. Aboard the Soviet spacecraft Vostok 1, Gagarin also became the first human being to orbit Earth for 108 minutes, traveling at 27,000 kilometers per hour. World Today Desk, DD India.
And that's it then in World Today for now. Thanks for watching. Namaskar.